From ABC, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
Good evening. We begin tonight with United Nations Resolution 678, and the key words in it are, by all necessary means. Today at the United Nations, after a long and concentrated effort, the Bush administration got the backing of the UN Security Council to use force against Iraq if the president decides that's what it'll take to get the Iraqis out of Kuwait. The vote was 12-2. The Chinese abstained. It doesn't mean force is automatic by any means, even after the January 15th deadline, which the resolution stipulates for Iraqi withdrawal. But in political terms, it is certainly a watershed. Our first report is from the UN, and ABC's John McWethy is there.
As he brought the Security Council to order, Secretary Baker said today's debate may be one of the most important the UN will ever have. He then issued a stern warning.
If Iraq does not reverse its course peacefully, then other necessary measures, including the use of force, should be authorized. We must put the choice to Saddam Hussein in unmistakable terms.
Iraq's ambassador to the UN accused the Security Council of being a willing tool of the U.S. He said Iraq wanted peace, but the U.S., because it refuses to negotiate, is trying to force a war.
If war is imposed upon us by the United States, this will be our destiny. I wish to reaffirm to you that our people will not kneel.
But member after member spoke in favor of the resolution, and when the vote came, Iraq was virtually alone.
12 votes in favor, 2 votes against, 1 abstention.
China, which could have vetoed the measure, abstained. Cuba and Yemen voted no. Though today's vote was an overwhelming success for the Bush administration, it had a price. For example, to bring China on board, Secretary Baker had to promise a Washington visit for the Chinese foreign minister and the prospect of better relations, even though China is again cracking down on dissidents. To win Soviet support, there were pledges to let Moscow know about U.S. military plans in the Gulf, no surprises, and an effort to get American friends like Saudi Arabia to help the Soviets with financial aid. And with Latin American and African foreign ministers, parts of the world Baker has been ignoring, there were promises that the U.S. would pay more attention and, if possible, provide more financial help. In trying to keep various Arab countries in the anti-Iraq camp, the Bush administration has paid a different kind of price. By snubbing Israel, the U.S. has allowed relations with that old friend to fall to a bitter low. Today's action in the Security Council is the first time since the Korean War that the UN has authorized use of force. But unlike 1950, when troops were fighting under the banner and nominal control of the United Nations, this time the various forces in the Gulf will be controlled by the countries that sent them. Their only obligation is to keep the UN informed of any action after the fact. So for the next 45 days, until the January 15th deadline, officials expect that a game of diplomatic chicken will be played, with more military forces pouring into the Gulf and all the world hoping that Saddam Hussein will withdraw his troops rather than fight. John McWethy, ABC News, the United Nations.
There is simply no public indication in Iraq at all that the vote in the UN this afternoon is causing Saddam Hussein to change his mind. A government newspaper in Baghdad this morning said such a resolution would be a declaration of war. Hussein himself was positively scornful. In Baghdad, ABC's Sheila McVicker.
In a forceful speech, Iraqi President Saddam Hussein rejected the United Nations Security Council resolution before debate on it had even begun.
When we hear about the UN resolution, we are not going to be terrified and shout for help.
Saddam dismissed the United Nations as no more than an arm of U.S. policy, unlike Iraq, subject to intimidation.
Rambo is only an American film, and it cannot be reality in Iraq.
Iraqi officials said tonight they will make more preparations for war. Additional military reserves may be called up. But in recent days, strong messages have been delivered about the consequences of Iraq's actions. First, Soviet President Gorbachev spoke bluntly with the Iraqi foreign minister, using language and tone described by Iraqi officials as rough. Yesterday, British politician Tony Benn told Saddam his hostage policy was increasing tension.
And I said I thought as far as the West was concerned, the main argument for war was that the Iraqi government was holding people.
There are indications tonight the Iraqi government may be prepared to reconsider holding hostages. An Iraqi official called the policy embarrassing, but acknowledged there is disagreement. If the hostages are released, it will be for Iraq's own purposes. Sheila McVicker, ABC News, Baghdad.
The Pentagon said today there are now more than 240,000 U.S. military personnel in the region, plus another 125,000 as part of the overall multinational force. Yet despite all that power and all the tough language from Washington, White House officials at the highest level told us today they simply do not know what Saddam Hussein thinks about all this. Here's ABC's Britt Hume.
The president said today he hopes the UN resolution authorizing force will succeed in sending a message which sanctions so far have not.
I think up till now we have failed to have Saddam Hussein understand how clearly the whole world feels against what he's done, and I think this new approach will guarantee that he does understand it.
And before a group of bankers, the president cited what a senior official said today is one of the main reasons the administration opposes giving sanctions a year or more to work.
There's a moral underpinning to what we're doing, but there's also an economic side to this equation, and that economic effects are devastating those who can afford it the least.
The president said higher oil prices are crushing both the fledgling market economies of Eastern Europe and the poor countries of Africa, besides pushing the U.S. economy into recession. Another key factor in the administration's thinking, according to a senior official, is its belief that even the most grievous situation, such as the plunder of Kuwait, comes to be accepted after a long period, thereby making it much harder politically to use force. And finally, this official said, the administration believes that if Saddam Hussein can be persuaded to leave Kuwait eventually by sanctions, then it follows he will be even more willing to leave if he also faces the threat of the U.S. military. The president tonight hailed the UN action as a sign of growing international resolve against Iraq. But that same senior official said that if the resolution's date passes without military action, there is a danger the U.S.-led coalition will appear to have blinked. He said that problem has been discussed here, but nobody yet knows what to do about it. Britt Hume, ABC News, the White House.
In a moment, some of the other news. Black South Africans demand that local town councils resign or else. On the American agenda tonight, doctors under increasing pressure not to perform abortions. And in Monterey, California, hoping that hunger will help evict hundreds of unwelcome sea lions.
This is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings, brought to you by Infinity.